Well, Tamika, I think we can get started. Do you want to kick us off?
Sounds great. Yes. Well, welcome everyone. Happy first Monday of May. Hopefully it's been a great day to all of you so far. Thank you for joining us. It's been an exciting, I guess, year and a half for Mass CEC, which brings us here really today. So excited to share with you our second round of funding that we have released this year. And if you have any questions at the end, Bev will be able to answer those questions, as well as from my team. I believe there's other workforce members on this call as well. Camilla will be looking at any questions that come in, and other members of the workforce team. So if there's a question that you do not get answered today, some office hours will be announced at the end, and we are more than happy to meet with you to discuss, some of your thinking. So, as you will see, from the first slide, Mass CEC, for those of you that do not know Mass CEC, as you can see, the mission down the bottom there is, grow the economy and help meet the state's ambitious clean energy and climate goals. I've been with Mass CEC for the past 10 years. My name is Tamika Jacques, Senior Program Director of Workforce Development, and it's amazing how much we have made, towards our clean energy climate goals, but we know that there is tremendous amount of work that needs to be done towards 2030 and 2050, which is why we are all here today, because Mass CEC cannot do this just by ourselves. We need every partner across Massachusetts to join with us and help us to meet these ambitious climate goals. So, next slide, I'm just going to go over the agenda. We'll talk about climate law equity, the workforce funding, how did we all get here? And then Bev will pick up from there, why planning grants. We'll talk a little bit about what are the climate critical occupations. We'll talk about selection criteria, application materials and requirements. And then again, if you have any questions at the end, any member of the workforce team will be on and able to answer questions. So next slide, please. So how did we get here, right? So last March, the governor signed a climate law bill putting us towards our 2030, 2050 climate goals. And so it immediately, with the passing of the bill, came to Mass CEC, $12 million annual that we received from the utilities under the Next Generation Roadmap Climate Law. And so what happened from that is that $12 million that Mass CEC receives per year, the current criteria of where that money can be spent on is residents of environmental justice neighborhoods, current and fossil fuel workers, and minority and women-owned businesses. And so this specifically today, we'll be talking about 1 and 2 residents of environmental justice neighborhoods and current and former fossil fuel workers. It's a lot to say. And the third topic, we actually have done webinars on how to apply for that funding that was released. That the first round of applications was due actually April 29th, this Friday. So we won't touch upon criteria 3, but if you have any questions, feel free to go to our website and you can find pre-recorded information on that on our webpage as well. So today, again, as I said, we're just addressing criteria 1 and 2 on here. And again, I look forward to everyone partnering with us as we move this forward. So with that said, thank you, and I will let Bev take over.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Bev Craig. I work on the workforce team at Mass CEC also. And today we're just going to talk about this more recent RFP, the $50,000 planning grants and what they're around. And as Tamika was mentioning, the climate law sort of defined where we can spend this money. And one of those places is on training residents of environmental justice census block groups or neighborhoods. And it's very specific what triggers that areas becoming environmental justice communities. But I think you don't really actually need to know too much about it, except that usually it's around a high proportion of low-income residents, a high proportion of English isolation, where English isn't the first language of many people, or a high proportion of minority composition. And so what is probably more useful if you're thinking about applying for these planning grants, we really want to target focusing on people who live in the areas that are in color right here on our map. So I think Camilla's going to put a link in the chat if you want to look at this. At the Department of Energy Resources has an environmental justice webpage, and on that is this environmental justice map viewer. And you can type in an address, you can look at communities, and you can see if different census block groups, which by the way, in like an urban setting, that's maybe about 6 blocks or so of people, whether any of those trigger any of these things. So the color coding on these maps has a whole bunch of different things that shows you, whether it's the English isolation, but it doesn't really matter so much what the thing that's triggering it is, as that you're going to be targeting people who live in some of these communities. And if we look more on a local level, I think it's somewhat helpful to see, if you look at, so I've sort of zoomed in on Worcester area on the left, and you'll see Worcester, there's a whole bunch of different colors, right? But you see like about 2/3 of it are in environmental justice census block groups. So that's, we would really want to be having people target those areas. And in particular, like the blues, that's where English isolation, there's a lot of people who don't have English as a first language living in those communities. And so translation would be important in recruiting probably. And, but on the other hand, there's probably about 1/3 of Worcester that is not in environmental justice communities. And so it's good for people targeting neighborhoods to know sort of where it is and where it's not. And so then North Grafton, there's a small bit where there's a high proportion of minority composition, and then Northborough, there's really none. So it's good, like whatever geographic area you're looking to try and train people for climate critical occupations and getting placed in jobs, that you sort of are understanding what the context is and where we would be really wanting to see our money spent. Again, if you look in Fall River, so down where offshore Fall River and New Bedford, where a lot of the offshore wind jobs are going to be, Fall River, it looks like about 1/3 is environmental justice neighborhoods, and New Bedford a lot, but then there's some communities down there like Lakeville or East Freetown that don't have any environmental justice communities. And having trouble, there we go. So what are we talking about when we talk about climate critical occupations? So our goal in the state is to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And there's sort of interim goals in 2030 and interim goals in 2050. And so Mass DEC actually has 4 focus areas for our work, and it does correspond pretty well with where the occupations are that we're going to need to see more people in. So high performance buildings, that's both creating new buildings that are very high performance, or retrofitting the 80% of buildings that exist today to make them a lot more efficient and getting fossil fuels out of them. Offshore wind, this is a totally new industry for us in Massachusetts. It is taking off now. We're seeing supply chains already responding and adding jobs. Clean transportation, this is around electrifying vehicles, whether it's passenger vehicles and the charging network, or even like trucks and heavier vehicles and even school buses. And then net zero grid is, we need to make our electric grid much more able to handle renewable energy and storage and solar. But what does that mean, like on an occupation basis? I know it's sometimes hard to transfer that like big picture stuff into like, well, what occupations should we be aiming to recruit people and train people for? Where are we going to see a lot of growth? So Mass DEC has already done 2 webinars that are very specific to a number of occupations where we believe there's going to be a lot of growth because of these new goals and new policies that are being put in place. So there's one webinar that's short training and less experience. It's been recorded. The slides are on our website. You can take a look at those. There are some with more training and higher experience, things like electricians, mechanical engineers, energy auditors. You can look at that as well. And then if you look at the website, if you put in the bit.ly down at the bottom, that's where our website is that has all these recordings. And I do want to say, like, so we have defined some high priority climate critical occupations. That doesn't mean that that's it, right? There are other categories, and feel free to, there are sales positions, for example, in most HVAC companies where people are going to be doing sales work for heat pumps, or electrical contractors. There's marketing jobs. So there are other jobs that aren't the technical installer role as well. If you are thinking of applying for a planning grant and you're thinking of looking at an occupation that's not on one of our webinars, feel free to show up at one of our office hours and run it by us. And we can let you know sort of what we think about the proposal that you're thinking of. So here is the money, $50,000 grants for planning. We're going to offer 15 of them, and proposals are due July 1st. So we have about 2 months before those are due. And I will say it's not a real complex application. The point here is to add capacity, to help organizations get partnered up with other both employers who would employ people that would go through a training program, to potentially pair up with support organizations that might provide support services like, say, driver's training, if you need a driver's license for a residential heat pump installer job, and even technical training. Some technical trainings do exist already in the state. You definitely should take a look at that before trying to create your own that would just mirror that. And so the point here is to provide capacity for organizations to create those partnerships, and especially reach out to those employers, and to write a longer term application. We know a multi-year grant application for training services can be a big lift. I certainly wrote a lot of grant applications myself. I know it's frustrating to spend a lot of time and invest a lot of effort and then not get funded. So part of this is to help basically pay you to think about the long-term bigger plan, and to position your organizations for either applying to our implementation grants that should be coming after, or other state funding. So there is, we're sort of the small, Mass DEC is the small fish really around workforce training in the state. There's very large workforce training monies on the state level, and we will be having webinars about those as well. Sometimes it might make sense for someone to apply for a planning grant here and then just use this as a springboard to focus on other state work, other state resources. So a lot of different kinds of applicants are eligible for these planning grants. Community-based organizations, community colleges, vocational schools. A lot of vocational schools now have career technical initiative evening programs for adult learners. So like carpentry programs, HVAC programs that are at night that are funded by the state. For-profit entities, including training companies. So there definitely are some HVAC companies, for example, that are private. If they could, they are potentially eligible to apply for these if they have if they score well. Coalitions of businesses, trade associations, home performance contractors, or other clean energy practitioners, definitely. And even the workforce investment boards, mass hire organizations would be eligible. So this isn't just free money with no expectations. There are some expectations for, what we're hoping is that all people who even apply for the planning grant take a look at, we really want them to watch or attend our pre-application webinars. So I mentioned the first two that are on the priority occupations. Again, those are on our website. You can watch them on demand anytime. You can look at the slides. Exemplary New York Workforce Training Partnerships. We held this just last week. It was really inspirational, actually. Incredibly good stories from Walden Energy and Soulful Synergy, and non-traditional employment for women, which goes and brings women into a lot of trade jobs. We will be having a second round of that because New York has been offering similar grants for a decade now. So there's a lot of great examples, and why start from scratch? Take the best ideas that seem to be working from other states. And then, so if you are awarded, if you're one of the 15 and you're awarded a grant, The next thing that we would need to do is finalize the grant contract with Mass CEC. And there will be a series of other post-award webinars and trainings. So some of those might be around like how to market successfully to environmental justice communities. It might be around best practices in workforce training. So the real meat of what we want organizations to do for this grant is to develop a workforce training outline. So this is figuring out who you're going to target. Is it youth coming out of a vocational school that don't want to go to college? Is it adults who lost their jobs in COVID, say from hospitality jobs, and now want to retrain for something else? Is it single mothers? Though whoever you're targeting, there's going to be different support services probably needed for them. And so it's really important that that be one of the things that you decide, as well as sort of what geography you're going to be looking at. Who are the employers? So are you focusing on electrical contractors? Who are the electrical contractors that would be in your area that are looking to hire if somebody comes out of an electrical training program? And then the next thing, so that outline is pretty well prescribed in the RFP. You can take a look at that. We don't need you to do that for this planning grant, but obviously the more you've thought about that, the better you're going to score. And we really, the point is what you propose in your planning grant application after you do your research may be very different, and try and reach out to create some of these partnerships. We recognize that. But it's still, there's probably going to be more applicants than just 15. So if you can partner up with someone who already has some piece of what you're looking to add to, you're probably going to be more successful. We will be hiring here at Mass CEC some experts on workforce training, and those will be technical assistants to all the grantees. So they'll be helping look at those early outlines of who's going to be targeted, what you're going to be training, which employers you've reached out to. And so working with that person to really improve that outline will be a big part of this grant process. And then finally, we are paying you basically to write a larger grant application, right? A multi-year grant application, to put metrics to that, to making sure you have all the pieces. So how are we going to choose between all the applications we get? We lay out pretty well in the RFP the selection criteria. The first is applicant team experience. So first, we do encourage partnerships. If you can team up with someone, even on this planning grant stage, you're going to be a step ahead of other people. If you have experience targeting services or trainings in environmental justice communities, that's going to be a plus. If you have experience or your partners have experience in workforce training, that's going to be a plus. If you have relationships with employers in clean energy fields, that's going to be a plus. Strength of initial vision. So this is sort of like, how well have you thought this out, even though it's not fully fleshed out? Like, do you have a vision? Does it make sense to us? That's going to be sort of part two. Envision partnership. Like, are you thinking that you will see if you can tie the vocational HVAC program in your community into this? If you can do upskilling of existing workers through something Commonwealth Corp already has. Again, we're going to have a webinar that does cover what some of these other state resources are that you can jump off of before the applications are due. But it makes a lot of sense to jump off of things that already exist, as opposed to creating standalone new things that don't really take advantage of the other infrastructure that's there in the state. Commitment. This is around, like, have you really defined a person who's going to pull together this outline, that's going to reach out to the employers that would commit to hiring someone, consider hiring someone, or taking someone on as apprentice who comes out of this program? Is this, it's okay to hire a consultant to help you with pieces of this, but we do want to see some incorporation within organizations that would be doing these trainings, that they bring it into the culture and the knowledge within the organization as well. And envisioned leveraging of resources, diversity of approaches is, so we definitely do need to have some balance within the state of geographies and types of occupations. We are going to be holding about half of the cost, half of the 15 for electrification related occupations. So that basically means heat pumps in heating and cooling, or electricians, which, by the way, we need more electricians than any other occupation, we're pretty sure. We are in the middle of doing a study actually that's going to better define what those occupations are, but I think it's pretty clear already from work that New York's done, sort of the direction of which occupations are going to grow and which ones aren't. So timeline, the application's been out for a few weeks now. Anytime you can ask questions and send it to this email here, workforce@massdec.com. We will be posting and adding to a list of frequently asked questions that will be on our main equity workforce page over time. So you can always check in and see what's been added, and maybe that'll answer some of the questions you have. We will be having quite a few office hours between now and July 1st. And we are hoping to choose the proposals by August. I will say we definitely hope to have implementation money, an RFP for that, out before the July 1st deadline, because we recognize that some people maybe already don't need a planning grant, that they may be ready to apply for bigger multi-year training money at this time. So keep an eye on our RFPs, make sure that you are on our listserv. If you don't think you are, feel free to put your email in the chat right now and we can add you to that email list. So scale threshold, I just want to point this out because I think, I know for our, at least for the minority and women-owned businesses, sometimes a single business will come in and ask, can we apply for this? And if you were big enough, potentially yes, but our implementation grants that we are hoping to put out, the minimum amount would probably be $200,000 for multi-year funding. If you and your partners don't think that you can attract, provide support services, train, and place at least 20 new participants to these clean energy occupations, then there's probably better resources on the state level for you to just directly be involved in a program that the state or Commonwealth already provides. So again, we are going to have webinars on what some of those resources are, but if you're not going to at least be this scale, you probably don't want to waste a lot of time either applying for a planning grant or an implementation grant. We should instead be getting you directly to a market maker or a mass hire organization, or using the Express program that Commonwealth has to get training for bringing new employees into your company. The application materials. So the first is just a signature and acceptance form. This is super easy, but the lead applicant does need to be a Massachusetts-based organization, and we need the signature of somebody who's the fiscal agent of that organization to say that this application is acknowledged by that organization. The real meat of this application is in the application form. And like I said, it's not real long. It's not meant to be. We're trying to give you money to plan. So there's only so much we can ask you to do in advance, right, of a planning grant. It has a number of different expandable forms. It allows you to add many partners if you would like to. So, it's totally fine if a vocational school wants to come in with a community-based organization and a coalition of churches, for example. Totally fine. 3 applicants, totally fine. Somebody needs to be the lead applicant, but that's great. You already got a core partnership in that case. Attachment 3, all it is an example of what our contract language is. It's what our lawyers make us put in every agreement, and you will need to acknowledge that you'll be okay with that contract language to apply. So we give it to you as an example. In the application form, you have to check a box saying that you are fine, your lawyers are fine with that language. So this is what the signature form starts off looking. All you do is get the fiscal agent to sign. Here's the real meat of the application form. So I mentioned, the lead, you have to figure out a Massachusetts-based lead organization. You can, at the bottom, it says partner organization. You can copy that over a bunch of times if you have 3-4 partners. this is where you start getting into the narrative, and we do want somewhat brief answers. We don't want 10-page applications. You don't want to write 10-page applications. But this is sort of like, do you and your partners have experience either in training, in being, within a certain environmental justice neighborhood, like just sort of giving us some context. And these grants are eligible for fossil fuel workers. If that is something you are targeting and not a geographic area, that is totally fine. But this is where you're going to be focusing, you're going to be explaining what areas you think you're going to be targeting. Again, this may change when you do more research. And I will say, I mentioned diversity of approaches and diversity of organizations. If any of your partners are minority and women-owned businesses, or meet the definition to get that certification, it's great if you would mention that in your application. So I think a lot of you are here and you would like to partner with people, and that's part of what we're trying to facilitate with this series of webinars. We would encourage that, and one of the things we want to do is we will have an Excel spreadsheet, and I think Camilla's going to put that link in the chat as well. If you're interested in networking with others or seeing who else is interested in similar occupations, in similar geographies, or that you could just learn from, there is this Excel spreadsheet. You are welcome to reach out to other people. You can put your name on it if you are interested in partnering. That's one of the ways. We are hoping to do a lot of networking after all of our webinars as well, with breakout rooms so you can meet a bunch of people, and maybe some of that will facilitate some partnerships. We also recommend coming to office hours. If we get to know you and we come across somebody else who's looking at a similar geography, or we know of a training program that's being offered in your area that might be customized to what you're looking for, we can help facilitate those connections as well. And now I'm going to hand it off to Camilla.
Thanks, Bev. Hi, everyone. My name is Camilla Bacolod, and I'm the Program Administrator for the Workforce Development Team. As mentioned earlier, we have some webinars coming up, and we have a webinar coming up on May 18 at 12 p.m. If you want to hear from presenters from Hudson Valley Community College, Solar One, and TST Board of Cooperative Education Services, and hear more about their New York State funded workforce training program. So I highly recommend, if you can, attending that webinar if you want to hear some inspiration or ideas of successfully implemented training programs. And we will also be planning to host another webinar at the end of May about other state resources related to workforce development. So more information about that will be determined. And again, that information will be posted on our workforce equity page. And we also have office hours coming up this week on May 5th and another one on May 18th. If you have any questions about the planning grant process, if you want to share your ideas, or if you want to network with other potential applicants, we highly recommend that you also attend those office hours. And again, all that information will be on our workforce equity page. We update it pretty frequently, and you can access that on this bit.ly link shown on the screen. I also shared it in the chat earlier, or if you search for Mass CEC Workforce Equity, it should be the first link that comes up. And now we will open it up to any questions. If you have any questions in the chat, or you can also raise your hand and unmute yourselves, and we will answer any questions.
So it looks like a lot of people have added themselves to the list. We will definitely get you on there.